Chase, I'm super excited to have you on Create Like the Greats, and thanks for coming on. I'm looking forward to this chat today. Before we jump in, I do have to say congrats from one girl dad to the next. I want to appreciate you for your grind, but also the dad life and blending it with the work life. So I'm going to start with the dad question. How has becoming a dad changed your perspective on business and life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thanks for having me. So I'm now a girl dad twice over. So I just
Love it.
had a new one a couple months ago. So I've got two girls and probably done. So that's my path.
Nice.
I think the biggest thing though, like kind of on the business side, like about 3 years ago, I had my first daughter.
Right.
And back then I was working like 6, 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day. The grind was real.
Yeah.
And I never thought like of this concept of like taking time off and
Mm,
paternity leave and all this would ever be feasible, possible, nor would I ever want it.
right.
And I actually forced myself to take one. And that was like the best thing I ever did. It took like 3 to 4 weeks off.
Yeah.
It allowed me to really think about what was important and
Cool.
allowed me really to restructure like my day to day and my work. So that way, in my business, I wasn't a bottleneck. And in my business, people weren't so dependent on me. And I
Mm,
think we created in, a short period of time, a lot of, people being a lot more leaders
yeah.
than kind of followers. I think in the beginning, you think it's kind of cool and you kind of have this ego as a business leader that you create these followers where in
Right.
reality, I realized I want to create a business where I have equals and I have other
Yeah.
leaders and I'm learning just as much from them, if not more than they're learning from me. So I think it allowed me to have that shift in mindset that like I
Right.
have to now keep the nights and the weekends open to
Yeah.
be there for my family because that's what I want and that's important. It also allowed me to start saying no more often. I
Mm,
started saying yes to everything, and now I'm just like, hey, look, I'm on paternity leave. I can't do it,
right.
right? And it's kind of
Right.
like an easy,
Yeah.
good excuse oftentimes. So,
It's true.
in 2 years from now, I might still be telling people I'm on paternity leave,
Right,
right?
right.
Um, but I
I'm
think
not
that's
gonna
kind of
lie. I use it still to this day as an excuse, and I know someone might be listening to this and they're like, Ross, so this is just an excuse, but it's real. Like when you have little ones, if you have a goal to be a good parent or a good dad, like you have to make some tough decisions. And like 22-year-old Chase would have probably said yes to everything. 22-year-old
yes.
Ross would have said yes to everything. But at these current points, it's like you can't always say yes. I think it definitely crystallizes priorities across the board. Do you run
Yeah,
into, would you say that's kind of the same experience that you've had?
yeah, 100%. And on that too, like I know that the time I have online is so finite, so I have to
Right.
figure out ways and systems to be so much more efficient, right?
Mm,
Before, I could just scroll Twitter and LinkedIn
right.
and read all these things. And those things happen, but now those happens like on nights and weekends when the kids are asleep. So
Right.
I make an effort every night after my kids go to bed
Yeah.
that I'm on the treadmill for like a half hour, 45 minutes, just listening to podcasts and catching up on the news.
Right.
Whereas before I used to spend the first few hours of my day,
Right.
doing that. And in hindsight, like I probably could have been more efficient before, but I just
Mm,
didn't have anywhere to be that I could kind of just stretch it out. So I've
right.
been way more efficient and I think way more effective as a result.
I love it. I would 100% agree. Congrats on the second. I'm at two as well. I've got two girls, one boy, and yeah, I'm done at this point. But congrats. So I want to
Thank you.
jump into something that I think you live as well, and this is I'm going to say two ideas, two concepts, and I'd be curious to get your thinking on them. So the first one is think like a media company. And the second one is media is the ultimate form of leverage. And when I think about people in this space, you seem to be someone who really gets media. Can you tell me a little bit around the way that you think about media and what these two ideas might mean for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like a couple months ago, I would have thought of media more in my world as like personal brand. I think personal
Mm,
brands are like the ultimate leverage. But I've also had this kind of concept that I've been working on over the past couple months, let's call it, where I want to build things that don't have my name and my face on it. So that way it doesn't require me. So I've
right.
got like these strong personal channels and these strong newsletters. So on social, collectively, I don't know, probably have 300, 400,000 followers across LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. My newsletter that goes out a few times a week is about 75,000 subscribers. So got a really big base of mainly folks in my personal brand.
Right.
But again, it requires me and my content and my thoughts where I love the idea of like this network of like theme pages or meme pages, if you want to
Mm,
call it that, kind of like what, you know, the Jerry Media Company did with like Fuck Jerry and some of
yep.
those pages on Instagram.
Yep.
Certain people used it back in the day on Facebook pages. We've seen that happen on Twitter. And I'm kind of leading into the next wave, which I think is going to happen on LinkedIn. So
Right.
I've been building out pages. Like one is called AI Evolution.
Yep.
It's been around for 75 days and I've grown it from 0 to 55,000
Right.
followers and it's gotten like 5 million, 7 million impressions.
Wow.
I've done the same thing with a copywriting page called Daily Copywriting, has
Right.
almost 50,000 followers. I've got a marketing page. So I think to answer your question,
You have to give
the
all the plugs
evolution.
first. Marketer tips, daily LinkedIn tips, copy MBA, email of the day. Folks, you have to check them out. It is literally a masterclass in how to run these pages. All right, now back to you. I did want to give you the plug
Thank
because
you.
it is deserved.
Thank you. Yeah.
But
If you
yeah,
want to take those, go for it. But yeah, so with that, like I went from personal brand being is the strongest leverage to now thinking more like an operator trying to
right.
simultaneously build the personal brand while also building these channels because they really work symbiotic. Where
Mm,
the pages really grew on the back of the personal
right.
brand, but now the pages help lift the personal brand and they really work together where I boosted them and created them and kind of took them from 0 to 100. And now they're helping return the favor because they're attracting audiences that I don't have on the personal brand side.
Right.
So I think like building that out is so great. I've
Yeah.
grown my newsletter to 75,000 subscribers and
Right.
90 something percent of that have come from Twitter and LinkedIn alone. And I feel like
Right.
I'm just starting to scratch the surface. So yeah, completely agree. I think like
That's cool.
everything I do is fueled by like, how do I build an audience? And then
Yeah.
how do I feed them products, services, courses,
Right.
events, whatever they want to learn. So that's been my strategy. Go hard on audience,
Yeah.
introduce courses. I have virtual events every quarter. I've got agencies. So now I'm figuring out the offerings for that and kind of backing into it.
Right. And with all of these media properties that you've kind of built up, they're driving attention, awareness,
Yes.
new leads, new prospects, etc. You're essentially building in many ways like a bit of a content moat, so to speak. Where do you see this going down the road? Like, do you view this little digital empire that you're building as kind of a portfolio of companies or a portfolio, so to speak, that you plan to maintain, or is the play longer term something else?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. And one other thing that I actually did pretty interestingly about 3 months ago, I bought 50% of a website called Lose the Very. And it's just a simple widget where it helps people remove the word very from their vocabulary. So kind of
Huh.
silly. That's literally all it does. It's free.
Interesting.
And what I liked about it is that it was under monetized. So the site gets about 150 to 200,000 visits a month, but
Right.
they were only making like a couple grand and they
Right.
had no newsletter collection. So the way
Mhm.
that I see social, the way that I see media is all around how do we build a newsletter. I've built newsletters in the past to 100,000, 500,000, subscribers.
Yep.
So I'm using organic social and I'm using these websites that I can go buy. I'm in talks with one of the largest AI media properties to buy
Okay.
a minority stake because I want to go do the same thing. I want to
Right.
build out the newsletter even further. I want to capture that attention. And I think the newsletter piece to me, that's
Mm.
the most interesting with all of this. And I
Right.
see organic social as a way to funnel people there. So I think the end goal is a couple of things. I think like each of these pages, right now they're just feeding to the Chase personal newsletter, but I think
Right.
they could be standalone newsletters on their own. I think building out events for each of them
Mhm.
is interesting. I kind of do more general marketing type events right now, but I think
Right.
as they get large enough, right, like as they're at 250,000, 500,000 followers, they become really powerful. Like this guy named Daniel Murray, he's built a really powerful page on LinkedIn to like
Marketing
500,
millennials.
600,000.
Right.
Exactly, 500, 600,000 people. And I can't disclose his revenue, but he does like really impressive numbers
Right.
on the back of that one page. So
Right.
I kind of see that. My goal for 2023 is to try to build the Chase network and kind of
Cool.
the page network
Cool.
to about 1 million followers on LinkedIn alone. Right now, I'm at probably 300,000 just
Right.
on LinkedIn.
Cool.
So that's my goal is to build it out. And then I think it obviously lends itself maybe to services. Like if
Right.
I could build this network, technically I could probably blow anyone's content up. The
Right.
way that these
Right.
all work, right, is like by sending likes and comments and engagement
Yeah.
early, you
Right.
can make things go viral. There's like this kind of antidote I've seen before where these guys, I think, had an agency called Social Chain.
Yep. I
They, at the
remember
start
that.
of a presentation, made up some fake soccer player or football player, I guess you should say,
Yeah.
and they made him trend on Twitter, right? Like, just think
Right.
about the power.
Yeah.
Obviously, with great power comes great
It's
responsibility,
true.
but
Yeah.
that's how I think about it.
Cool. Talk to me through what you view as the steps to get to this 1 million mark. So that's where you're going. That's where you're heading. How do you make that come to life?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think there's three things in particular on LinkedIn that you have to do well. I think one is good content, right? Like that's number one. That's non-negotiable. That's every
Yep.
platform. Two is volume. I think people are slacking on the volume.
Mm.
Dude, I'm posting a minimum of 3 times per day on LinkedIn on my personal
Right.
page
Right.
every single day,
Right.
7 days a week.
Right.
I'm not on the mindset of like, hey, it's only Monday through Friday.
Right.
Like I live and breathe and die by this, dude. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed.
I love
So I
it.
post 3 times a day per minimum. So it's like, how do I at the very least maintain that, or how do I 2x that, right? Like I'm
Right.
thinking about ways in which I can 2x it.
Mm.
Potentially the quality of the content comes down a little bit,
Right.
but it's just a quantity game. Every time I post, it's an opportunity for me to gain followers, build trust, offer
Right.
value, and or go viral, right? Like you
Right.
don't know what's going to blow up. Dude,
True.
2 or 3 days ago, I posted something really simple and silly about like the psychology of how you think about discounts, where
Yeah.
the smaller the actual price of it is, showing a percentage off typically converts better. So let's
Mm,
say $50 is the product.
right.
By showing 10% off, most people are going to convert more on that than $5 off, right? Even
Right.
though it's the exact same thing. But if
Yeah.
I was to tell you the product is $1,000, if I was to tell you, hey, it's $100 off or 10%, the
Mm,
dollars off tends to lend better, just through
right.
my data. Dude, I
Right.
posted this, thought it was super simple, didn't think much of
Right.
it. Dude, it got like north of 1,000 likes. It
That's
got like,
wild.
75,000
Yeah.
to 100,000 impressions.
Love
So
it.
the way that I see it post is like every post gives me either learnings or insights or knowledge about things I can expand on
Right.
in Twitter threads or LinkedIn carousels
Yeah.
or newsletters,
Right.
or just gives me a chance to connect with someone.
Right.
So long winded, I think like, and then the last one is distribution or engagement. So
Mm,
again, so rounding it out, it's quality content, quantity content, and engagement.
mm,
So on my pages, I only post once per day because it's just me doing it kind of like
right.
as a side hobby.
Yeah.
I would love to get those now to 3 times a day,
Right.
morning, afternoon, and evening, because a lot of people that follow me and engage with me are global. I've
Yeah.
got people in the US, in Europe, in Asia,
Right.
Africa, etc. So just posting at different times in the day to reach different audiences.
Right.
So I think just increasing volume on the pages as the pages grow, as I create more pages, it just really has like this compounding network effect.
Right. And do you see from all of this, like, what's your play to actually make that scalable? Like, are you going to start bringing in teammates and colleagues to support on this? Like today, what does the operation look like to manage all of these things, the agency, the kids? Like, what's going on in your world that gives you the ability to always be on? I'm very
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the hardest thing to learn, but the best thing for me to learn was the fact that like I really need to double down and lean into my strengths and just
Mm,
ignore my weaknesses. And
right.
ignore my weaknesses doesn't mean like it doesn't get done. It means I find an employee or a partner.
Cool.
So on the agency side right now, we're about 139 employees. I'm
Right.
one of 4 owners. We
Right.
have employees in 6 countries.
Cool.
There, like we've gotten to the point where like there's senior level, there's execs, we've got mid level, we've got juniors, we've got associates. So
Right.
at that point right now, I'm kind of just like the face of the
Cool.
agency on the stuff that I talk about, primarily email,
Yep.
kind of our retention team. And I drive leads. So there, I wouldn't say it's automated, but I'm pretty hands off.
Cool.
Spend a couple hours a week on that business, just creating content and driving business.
Right.
And all the other ones too. Like when I think about my role, it's very content revenue
Right.
operations kind of focus, like in terms of that side,
Cool.
and very little on like the back office, like finance, accounting,
Right.
hiring, bookkeeping, etc.
Right.
So really, the thing I think that's allowed me to run multiple businesses and to scale is just specifically focusing on the things I enjoy and I'm good at. So
Mm,
again, like my full time job now, in a sense, is being a content creator,
right.
but I'm not a content creator like most people are content creators and they have like just a course.
Yeah.
I've got all these different types of businesses that really are synergistic and they feed itself.
Right.
So if I post content on LinkedIn, it builds the personal brand, but it also feeds the agency.
Right.
If people go through my course, that benefits me personally, but like
Right.
a lot of people realize that like doing e-commerce email marketing is a lot of work. So they end up buying the course and then hiring me, right?
Right. Right.
So I think A is like picking things that have overlap and synergy,
Yep.
and then B, picking the same role across all the businesses. So
Mm,
the context changing and the context shifting is very minimal.
right.
It
Right.
doesn't really matter what business I'm working on. I'm kind of working on all the businesses at the same time in a sense.
Yep. Right.
And then how do I go from here to where I'm going? Doing a lot of kind of testing around like AI,
Cool.
trying to teach the kind of Chat GPT and some of the other tools my specific style.
Right.
For the personal brand, I'm a little bit more particular about it. Like it
Right.
has to be really on point.
Yep.
But the nice thing about some of these other channels I'm bringing, I can bring in teammates, I can bring in
Right.
ghostwriters, I can bring in assistants,
Yep.
I can repurpose from the personal brand. So I really like that side of the arm because
Cool.
I could bring in team members or automate things more easily because
Right.
I'm less protective and less obsessive about it because it's not under the Chase Diamond umbrella.
Right.
So that's
Right.
kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Very cool. Let's pretend I'm running a new LinkedIn page called Daily Photography, and I
Yeah.
want to follow the Chase Diamond blueprint. What advice would you give me to get started and to actually someday be able to scale and get to a level that you are at?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think one is like you have to consume good content to understand like the types of things that people are interested in and
Mm,
kind of things that maybe move you. And then as you're creating content, like I think it's like building a muscle. Just like you work out every day, you practice and you build this muscle where over time you're gaining muscle mass and you're getting in
right.
better shape. With content, you just have to practice posting every single day, and you have to realize and be understanding that most people aren't going to see it. And,
Right.
and and you know, I've been creating content for a very very long time. People just started founding me about 12 to 24 months ago, but I've been
Right.
doing this 6, 8, 10 years, right? Like,
Right.
so I don't know if I was crazy enough or I was silly enough or dumb enough, but I just started creating content and I almost looked at it as like a journal for myself.
Cool.
If nothing else, it was a good way for me to look back on. And that's what kind of kept me going. So I think like just building the muscle.
Right.
And then I think finding other like minded friends, coworkers, family members to
Right.
kind of boost each other's content, super important, right?
Mm,
Good content and a lot of content alone isn't going to move the needle. You
right.
need someone to engage with it, or you need multiple people to engage with it. And I think you might even talk about this too, right? Most people spend all their time on content creation
Yeah.
and very little time on content distribution. Where at this point now, like my 80/20 is spending 80% of the time just distributing it, right?
Yeah.
Creating the content now because I've built this muscle and built this library and built this database is easy.
Right.
Like
Right.
I basically, people ask me like why I don't schedule posts. It's
Right.
because when I post things, I get this feeling and I talk to people and I'm looking at the internet
Right.
when things are popular and
Mm,
when people are on lunch and when people are texting me and when people are around
right.
and when I actually have time to go engage with all my other accounts and
Yeah.
respond from my account. I think the biggest mistake that I made is I was posting on LinkedIn
Mm,
and then I was dipping, I was bailing. I was like, I would
right.
post there, forget that I posted, come back in a few days and like,
Yeah.
oh wow, people had questions and people asked things.
Right.
And dude, someone actually called me out on LinkedIn saying like,
Oh, really?
Chase's content is so good, but
Yeah.
I've commented on a dozen of his posts and I've never seen him like it. I've never seen him
Mm,
comment. And that I really took to heart.
right.
And now I carve out 10, 15, 20 minutes after I post just
Right.
to respond.
Right.
Most of the time, I literally just like things, copy and paste saying thank you, but it's
Right.
something, right?
Yeah.
It's meaningful enough
Yeah.
that it's made a big difference. I now notice the same people as soon as I post comment. And
Right.
even whether I just like it or comment back, it really helps.
Right.
So that's kind of how I think about it. It's like
Yeah.
you have to create content,
Yeah.
you have to practice creating content. Your content's gonna suck.
Yeah.
It's gonna slowly get better,
Mm,
and then you're gonna look back and it's still gonna suck. Like the stuff I'm making today,
right.
well, I think it's good. In 3 years, I'm gonna look back and be like, damn, I knew so little, right?
Right, right, right. I
Which is
think
great. That's
yeah,
growth.
it's true. I think that's so interesting. Like you're in a very interesting point where when you start getting those comments, it means you built like a community, really. Like people
Yes.
are coming back to you and responding multiple times. They're looking
Yes.
for a bit of a dialogue. You're at a very special point in like your creator journey where it's like now your platforms aren't just Chase's platforms. They're a community of like-minded
Yes.
individuals where if somebody even calls you out, your community will now have your back and they'll start to like represent you, which is special. So congrats on building that.
Thank you.
It's very cool to see. When you
Thank
think
you.
about your content creation process, I know that you've shifted heavily into like recognizing the importance of distribution. Can you talk me through like from the start of the day through to the end of the day, what does your creation process look like with this creator hat as like your kind of MO and your main priority?
Yeah, so I think like the morning when I wake up, it's all about the inputs. What are the things that I'm being fed? So I'm, looking at things that I posted yesterday on social and kind of how they performed and what comments or questions people asked.
Right.
I'm looking in all the Slacks that I'm in, my agency Slacks and just third party Slacks I'm in. What are the questions? What are people sharing? What are they saying? Are there any kind of relevant news
Right.
stories kind of in the business space that have happened? What's going on in AI?
Right.
What events are happening? So in the morning, it's just like, how do I consume as much as possible? So
Mm,
that way, over the course of the day, I've kind of got to this point where subconsciously I'm digesting it. It's
right.
like I'll consume, I'll consume, and then while I'm on something like this or I'm responding to emails,
Right.
I'll be like, oh, I got something, and then I'll
Right.
go quickly write it down, right?
Right.
Um, or like honestly, like depending on what I'm doing, like because my LinkedIn stuff is newer, and because dude, I've literally gone from 27,000 followers to 187,000 followers in 7 months.
That's wild.
Most of the content that I shared on Twitter or on LinkedIn 7 months ago,
Right.
no one saw.
No.
So like a lot of that is like what's the easy win? Like what can I repurpose from 6 or 12 months ago that no one saw?
Right.
And now I have a new audience that either A, I can just straight up repurpose the same
Yeah.
thing, or B, how can I add new context with the new learnings, or how can I even update the numbers? So
Right.
maybe it was something like, here were 10 email marketing tips I learned from 100 million in revenue. It might
Right.
just be something as simple of like, here's 10 things I learned from $200 million in revenue,
Right.
right? And it could be
Right.
the exact same thing. Or
Right.
maybe I'll tweak like number 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
So it's a quasi of like repurposing things from the
Mm.
past,
Yeah.
and or editing things from the past,
Right.
or creating net new things. But
Right.
because I have such a backlog of, I've been tweeting times a day, every day for 3 years. I've
Right.
got
Right.
so many things that I want to expand on.
Yeah.
I'm also creating 3 newsletters a week. So there's like
Right.
just different bites from there that I want to pull from.
Yeah.
I might just see something that I like on social and just repost it and kind of credit the person. I might just say
Right.
like, I think I've done this before with you before. I'll screenshot your
Yeah.
post so you can see your
100%.
name,
Yeah.
and then I'll use the text you, and then I'll credit Russ,
Tag.
right?
Exactly. Yep.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
people, I've had one person complain ever that I did that,
Oh, really?
and 1,000+ people have said thank you so much, because it's
Yeah.
like
It's
as you get to
free promo.
scale,
Yeah.
exactly, it's great promo. You create the content for the distribution. I think one person's just like, hey, this is my content. I spent a lot of time on it. Don't reshare. I'm like, all right, cool, and I just
Right.
took it down.
Yeah.
But every other person has appreciated it. So
100%.
long-winded. It's like consume, create, repurpose,
Mm.
edit, create, right? So it's kind of like
Right.
this dialogue where like, my team is feeding me things that like they want me to teach them, and people are asking me things. I'm just really kind of almost compiling like this mental and sometimes this physical FAQ of like
Yeah.
the things in which content I created before people had questions about. So it's almost like an extension, or it's like
Right.
this is like the version 2 of it. Does
Right.
that make sense?
100%. No, I think that's very much the blueprint that a lot of creators should be following, but instead most are trying to create from the ground up every single day. Net new, let me just come up with an idea, let me look at a blank screen and genius will hit me, versus like this model where it's like look at your own greatest hits, look at some of the inputs from people who are talking to you and use all of that for inspiration. I love that. When you're thinking about all of these assets that you're producing, they're all going back to the newsletter. Someone's
Yes.
listening to this thinking, how in the world do you make money from a newsletter? How would you
Yeah.
describe the monetization strategy that you've embraced? Could you tell me a little bit around that and how it works?
Yeah, not to toot my own horn, but I've gotten pretty good at this point, and it's because it's a couple of things. I think a lot of creators create massive followings, but they don't think about monetization until they're already big,
Hmm.
and so it's not really like ingrained in the DNA of their content or kind of their audience.
Right.
From the beginning, my goal is always to add value, but I
Right.
think value is a two-way street. You give and you take, right? So
Right.
I'm giving value, and a lot of it's altruistic, but I also know selfishly that it's going to return back in my direction
Right.
in a number of ways. Whether it's a client, whether it's a course buyer, whether it's someone that paid for one of my events,
Right.
whether someone's paid for consulting, right? So I think value is a two-way street, and I have no shame in that, right? Like
Right.
I give, and that's the only reason I'm still here today creating
Right.
content, is because it's been able to provide a lifestyle for me.
Right.
So ways in which I monetize it, there's a couple. So one is the most kind of traditional sponsors within the newsletter.
Right.
So the problem I'm facing right now is I have limited inventory, right? Post
Mm.
the newsletter 3 times a week.
Right.
And the way that I structure deals is I sign monthly retainers. I don't do these really
Right.
one-off deals. So
Right.
I've had the same sponsors for the last 3, 6, 9 months. It just hasn't changed. I haven't upped the price, etc. And it kind of comes with this package of
Right.
newsletter posts as well as kind of social media posts.
Right.
So I'm charging all these companies $5,000, 7,500, 10 grand a month. And
Right.
the nice thing for me is I don't have to worry every month about who's going to sponsor this, right?
Right. Right.
The downside, right, is like I technically probably could be charging, instead of 5 to 10K, probably could be charging
Right.
10 to 20K, because when I signed these deals 3, 6, 9 months ago,
Things are
my
growing.
audience was
Yeah.
a fraction of it.
Right.
But the way that I think about it is like, these people believed in me,
Sure.
right? They gave me things early on. I might as well be good,
Yeah.
and just build this out. And in the future, if I want new inventory, I have to launch new things. So my biggest challenge is like, with all the things that I'm doing, going to like a weekly going from like 3 times a week to a daily newsletter, right? Like,
Right.
I don't know that my audience wants daily, because when I
Right.
first signed up, most people were told they were going to get a weekly thing, right?
Right.
And then I updated it to twice a week, and now it's 3 times a week, right? And my unsubs are, like really, really great. It's like
Right.
0.1% of
Yeah.
people unsub per email, which is really, really good. So newsletter sponsors, one.
Mm.
And then also two, like there are companies out there that allow you to monetize like on a cost per sub or a cost per click basis. So
Right.
I've got different partnerships and things lined up where some newsletter or some, I don't know, other company might come in and they'll say, hey, Chase, I'm going to pay you $3 per click, or I'll pay you $3 per sub.
Right.
So I've got now like in the newsletter, some sections that are for people that are on this monthly retainer sponsorship. I've got some that are kind of, I guess, quote unquote affiliate or performance based.
Mm.
And then I also plug things of my own. So every quarter I do a virtual event.
Yeah.
I've got courses. So sometimes I'll do dedicated emails to my newsletter for courses.
Right.
Maybe about 3 weeks ago, I was just like, hey, I got tons of people asking me if I'm ever going to run a sale on my course. I haven't done one in a long time.
Yep.
Let me run a sale. It's a 24-hour flash sale. No one had a heads up. I
Yep.
sent 3 emails and it made like, I think 15 grand, right? From
Love it.
3 sends of emails, took
Love it.
me 15, 20 minutes to write.
Right.
So between like the, actually outside of just like the course and stuff, that just between like newsletter sponsors and social sponsors and kind of some of these affiliate deals,
Yep.
dude, that will do probably about mid six figures for me this year in revenue, and
Right.
almost all of it's profit, just
Right.
because it's
Right.
just me and I already
It's
am acquiring
pixels.
the audience.
Yeah.
Exactly, I don't pay. So yeah, like I think the wheel that I have is greater than most people, just because I have a lot of businesses in terms of
Mm,
like I can monetize it through agency clients, I can
right.
monetize it through consulting deals. Dude, I had a client pay me 10 grand a month for a 45-minute call a week, right? And they
Right.
came from the newsletter.
Yeah. Right.
One of the largest companies in Israel paid me $4,500 for a 1 hour call to teach their team about email marketing.
Right.
So
Right.
it's almost like overwhelming because the opportunities once you build it are like endless. Like I
Right.
have like so many things I want to promote and so
Yeah.
many things that I want to do and so much demand,
Right.
but I just don't have enough supply.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I see you're an advisor in some brands, you're an angel investor in brands
Yeah.
as well. Like you've got a really solid amount of different wheels just spinning. Where does the angel investor effort like come into fruition? Like what brought that to life for you? And then this advisor track, I'd be curious to know a little bit more about that. So I know there's two questions there, but I'd love to hear like
Yeah.
what's going on with all of these different pieces and how's that all going?
Yeah, so I think like when I had no audience and therefore no leverage, I had to put money into companies to get,
Mm,
points or like or
right.
equity or shares or options.
Yep.
So a lot of like the early stuff was more like, hey, I'll invest in the numbers aren't big. I'll invest 5,000 to 20,000, let's say, into
Right.
a company, right?
Yep.
And oftentimes like the amount that I own at that little check size is like a
One
percent
or
of a
points.
percent of a
Yeah.
percent, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, but I felt early on that doing like the angel advising stuff would get me into rooms that I otherwise probably wouldn't be privy to.
Mm,
So I almost was trading like money for access in a sense. And now kind of the evolution of that is like, because I have the platform, because I have the distribution, companies are coming to me saying,
right.
hey, we don't really necessarily care about your money. If you want to put money in, we'd love to have you. We want to give you options and we want to give you shares and equity to advise us. So
Mm,
the early part was I had to give money, and I probably
right.
invested in, I don't know, 3 to 5 companies where I wrote, $5,000 to $20,000 checks.
Yeah.
Now I'm in another 3 to 5, let's call it, where I'm not writing money. I'm
Right.
just giving them time
Right.
or kind of advice, and
Yeah.
now I'm getting shares.
Right.
So one of the most successful ones I've been into was this company called Triple Whale, and I got in with them at their seed round as an advisor. I got like $20,000 worth of shares in their seed round.
Nice.
Dude,
Yeah.
these shares, I can't say the exactly, but these shares have, let's say, between 15 to 30x on
Right.
paper, right?
Right.
So that they're somewhere in the mid six figure range in terms of
Right.
on paper.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know if I'm ever going to see a dollar or a cent
Yeah.
from that,
For sure.
but I'm doing
It was
more
a
of
good
that.
bet. Right now, it was a good bet. Yeah.
Exactly. I look good on paper.
Yeah.
Is my bank account gonna be thanking me later? I don't know.
Right.
But part of what I'm doing now, and this isn't for everyone, but because I have such limited inventory and I have only want to promote things that I trust, it's like
Mm,
I almost have to have equity in a company to then let them pay me to promote. So
right.
almost kind of like it went from me paying them to get access to
Yeah.
them giving me points to
Right.
advise. And now the more or less the only companies that can promote in my audience, because I got such low inventory, is companies I have equity in. So
Right.
one is called retention.com. I have, some ownership in there, and they also pay me to
Right.
do it. So it's almost like that's the way that I'm moving,
I love
is
it.
like I have to have, a lot of different bets where it's like, a base kind of compensation, maybe a retainer or plus performance pay plus, equity. So it's almost like it kind of sounds a little bit greedy, but as you kind of build the audience, you have such little that you
Yeah.
can do that
Right.
you have to be picky.
Yeah.
And you throw these deals out there thinking that people are going to tell you to F off and that you're crazy.
Right.
And then people are either like, yes, or they'll negotiate, right?
Right. It's true. I think what's interesting is like you're talking about essentially ownership and like using leverage to kind of be able to get
Yes.
ownership in some of these companies. And then ultimately you're looking for these wins like the triple whales, et cetera, to kind of essentially build wealth for yourself.
Yes.
What gave you that perspective on trying to like build equity through wealth, like or build wealth through equity and ownership? Like could you give me a bit of an understanding of that philosophy? And I want to take this even a little bit step further. So think about the little ones, your two little ones. Talk
Yeah.
the message that you would have to them about the importance of ownership if they're trying to like create wealth. Could you just give the insights around why you believe ownership is important and why it's something that you've leveraged in your growth?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I think about like when I take on a business opportunity. So I've got like my agency, for example, where we did right around $10 million last year in revenue, and we're growing.
Yeah.
And in that, like the annual cash flow from that right now isn't great because we're reinvesting everything just aggressively into growth, right?
Right.
But the play there is like a mid to long term play where if we get this to 20, 30, $40 million in revenue, the exit there will be 8 figures. So that one is really where a lot of my eggs in are for like mid to long term growth. But it's not like, again, we get paid decent, right? We get paid like low 6 figures for that business, but it's not like making me wealthy today.
Right.
I've
Right.
got other plays where I run the newsletter and I do courses. Those are great short term cash, but like
Mm,
no one's going to buy my course business because it's
right.
my face and everything,
True.
and no one's going to buy my newsletter business because it's my face. So the play there is like maybe short to midterm, potential long term cash flow. I want cash flow. I own it, but like it's not going to become something that it's a sellable asset.
Right.
And then I was working with a lot of these people through the newsletter in my audience, and a lot of times I wouldn't disclose how much I was making them, but every month they came back to re-up, right?
Right.
And it didn't matter whether I raised my price or they were the
Yeah.
same, they kept re-upping. So I just started thinking like, if they're paying me X, I got to be making them,
Right.
2X, right? Or
Right.
3X. I'm like, how do I start sharing in this upside, right?
Mm,
Do I do like a lower base plus like percentage of pay? So I kind of did that type of thing. And then I started seeing what I was making these companies, right? If they
sure.
were paying me 5 grand, I was often doing 15 to 30 grand for them, right? So it's
Right.
like, instead of charging them five, I would charge them like 3,500 or 4 grand, and I would take like 25 or 30% of the revenue I brought them. That way, we both shared in the winnings.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where it's like, okay, if I can negotiate a base plus performance, can I negotiate equity?
Mm,
And just by being dumb enough, by being greedy enough, by not knowing what I was doing, I just started asking, right?
right.
Like the whole thing, like closed mouths don't get fed.
Yeah.
I've never been afraid to ask. The worst
Love
thing
it.
that someone's going to say is no.
Right.
And oftentimes a lot of people do say no. It's like, I'm already giving you a great deal. Like, why do you need more? It's like,
Right.
well, I've got such level inventory. Like, this is what I want, and this is
Right.
what I feel is fair.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it. And then they cave in, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. I love it.
and with those, it's like it's great because those align with short, mid, and long term. Or
Mm,
let's say with this retention.com deal,
right.
I have equity in the company,
Yeah.
and my deal with them is kind of structured, and I'm just being very transparent, where it's a flat fee
Yeah.
or a percentage, whichever is greater.
Right.
So, let's say they pay me X, and then the percentage that I take on revenue is 20%. So
Right.
let's just say, again, this isn't the right number, but let's just say they pay me $1,000. Let's
Yeah.
say they pay me
Yeah.
$1,000.
Right.
And if I was to drive them, let's say $10,000 in revenue, the
Right.
20% would be 2K. So they either would pay me the 1K for that
Mm,
month if I didn't make more, or
right.
if I made more, they'd pay me 2K. So kind of I'm structuring these deals too,
Cool.
where it's like I want to have the upside in the greater situation.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps, but like that kind of protects me short term. I get cash flow,
Right.
midterm and long term. If there's a liquidation or transaction event, they go
Right.
public, if they get acquired, if they raise
Right.
fundraising,
Yeah.
I have the ability to share in that upside. So I don't know what it equates to, but like I just
Yeah.
wasn't afraid to ask. And
Love it.
again, a lot of people tell me like no, but some people say yes, and those are the people I work with.
Right. I love it. That's awesome. Do you see yourself down the road, like let's say 15, 20 years, you do get to see these exits, et cetera. Are you still doing the same type of thing, or have you switched it up? Are you kind of relaxing on a beach or something like that?
That's a good question. I mean, I genuinely love what I do. Like,
Yeah.
I was on paternity leave for a while, and like, I love my family, but I was also itching to get back to work because I'm just
Right.
so obsessed with what I do. And like,
Yeah.
every day, like, growing subscribers and growing followers, it's just
Yeah.
like, it's such a fun game that I
It's
like
a
to
fun
play.
game. I agree.
And as like I get better at it, and again, still don't know everything, but as I get better, it just makes me want to become better, right?
Right.
Like I want to be the best at everything I do. Like I want to be
Right.
in the top 1% of everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I
That's
think
cool.
I would like to think I'm doing what I'm doing just on a
Mm,
larger scale,
right.
right? Hopefully more zeros behind all my following, instead of like
Love it.
180 something on LinkedIn, hopefully I'm at like 1.8 million,
Right.
right? And
Right.
instead of, X numbers of dollars in the bank, hopefully it's,
Yeah.
more zeros, right?
Love
So
it. I love it.
I really love what I do.
Cool.
I've been really interested in this concept too, like kind of going back to like that lose the berry site. and
Mm,
this AI site that I might buy into. I really like this idea too of like buying under monetized sites that have lots of traffics and
right,
building like really strong newsletter businesses. So
right.
right now it's just like personal capital that I'm doing that with. I don't know if that ends up becoming something I build a fund for.
Mm,
Um, I don't know. I really like the idea of like doing these things and maybe partnering with other people and
yeah,
kind of dividing and conquering. So we'll see. It's probably somewhere in the middle.
cool.
Maybe I'm working on my social media accounts from the beach, but I definitely want
Right.
to be working.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. It's an interesting play. Like there's a lot of folks on LinkedIn will go hard against working hard and like embracing the idea of some of the grind, which is like kind of a part of being a content creator. What is your thoughts on the anti-work movement and that whole shift? Like, do you think if someone is looking to actually have a meaningful impact on content creation, they're trying to build these pages, etc., is there a shortcut? Is it possible for someone to not work hard and get there, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been on all this ends of the spectrum at some point or another, right? On paternity leave, I was like doing nothing, and on
100%.
before that, I was doing 6 7 days a week the
Right.
grind. I think there's like a happy medium, right? Where like
Mm,
it is really hard work and it is a lot of work, but if you enjoy it, it doesn't feel like that, right? Like I genuinely love it. That like I'm obsessed and I want to
right.
do it, and I wish I could spend more time on it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you have to work hard, but I've also like channeled that into like how do I work really smart? And
Mm,
the way that you do that is you find one, two, maybe three people on a platform
yep.
that you want to aspire to be. That
Right.
if I could tell you, hey Chase, in 6 months you could be like Ross on Twitter, or
Right.
you can be like Ross on LinkedIn, or whoever it is that you look up to. What would you do to get there? Like what are you willing to do?
Right.
And then reverse back kind of into that thing. So I think on every platform there is this small percentage, there's a handful of people that
Mm,
know something that you don't, right?
right.
On YouTube, there are people that know things I don't, and I suck at
Right.
YouTube and I can't get past 10,000 subs, right?
Right.
On Instagram, like I've been stuck at like 20,000 followers for years. I just no
Right.
matter what I do, I
Right.
just can't crack it. I try the shorts, I try the reels, I
Yeah.
try this, I try that, I
Right.
try the carousel post. I just can't do it.
Right.
But on Twitter, I'd say I've semi figured it out. And
Right.
on LinkedIn, I've really figured that out lately in
Right.
terms of building this. So it's like, can you find people like me, not saying
Mm,
me, but people like me, and can you hire them?
mm,
Can they consult for you? Can you pay
right.
them to do it?
Right.
Can you join a cohort that they're doing? Like whatever it is that they offer. And
Right.
the interesting thing is like most people at the highest level don't offer this stuff, right?
Right.
And it's really been something that I've been toying with. I've had tons of people asking me if I'd grow their LinkedIn's, and I've
Yeah.
kind of said sure to some people. We could try this out, and other people I'm like, no, I don't do this. And I've
Right.
never offered social media.
Yeah.
I've always found the most enjoyment and the most value and the most benefit from just selfishly doing it myself.
Right.
Um, but like it's also too, it's like, man, like should I be offering it? So I'm
Right.
kind of in like this equilibrium. I'm kind of like in this limbo place of like being pulled in either direction. Like, do I
Yeah.
do it? I've told some people that we can start soon, and like, do
Right.
I want to do it? So
Right.
I'll probably just end up offering it as a service to help other people. But like,
Cool.
it's interesting 'cause I've wanted to hire other people on LinkedIn and Twitter, and the people that I've wanted to hire don't offer it. So it's kind of
Right.
this annoying thing that
Yeah.
makes me want it more.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but like it's working hard, but like really working smart,
Yeah. That's
following the right people. Like the way
right.
that I learned how to grow on LinkedIn is I just picked three people to follow, and every single day I'd
Mm,
look at their posts.
right.
How often were they posting? Were they posting images? Were they posting links? Were they
Right.
posting carousels?
Right.
Who was engaging with their stuff? Were
Right.
they editing their description?
Yeah.
Why do they post every day at 10 a.m. PST? What am I missing? Like
Right.
why are they doing this? Are they
Yeah.
trying to create consistency and psychologically with their followers that they know to expect a post from Ross every day at 10 a.m. PST?
Right.
So like I obsessively for like 3 months just studied
Right.
creators and then reverse engineered it. And
That's
dude, like I ended up I'm not growing faster than those creators that I like was not copying, but like pulling
learning
insights
from.
from, right?
Yeah. Right.
So it's kind of crazy. That
Take us to school on that. Like you studied it. You went to school, the
yeah,
self-created MBA of studying the LinkedIn.
yeah.
What are some of those lessons that you learned that you didn't know until after going through the process of reverse engineering some of the best? And what can you share that will assist someone who wants to
Yeah.
get to that level? Like break it down
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. I think every platform has different content formats or different content types that work. For a really long time on Twitter, it was Twitter threads. You would
Mm,
write Twitter threads And if you had the right people engaging, like those would blow up. And I still think Twitter threads are effective. I think they're a little bit less effective than they were before. I feel like Twitter's obviously a
Yeah.
whole weird state right now.
Yeah.
But like, for example, Twitter threads were the way to grow. Right now on LinkedIn, it's LinkedIn carousels, which most people are just repurposing Twitter threads into a carousel. And it's basically, think about like a PDF. It's almost like a group of images or a document that you scroll between for those that are unfamiliar. So carousels really seem to be working. So I just kept seeing, like, I didn't even know what a carousel was. I didn't even know how to create it. I kept seeing these people making it.
Right.
I'm like, dude, these seem to be getting the most engagement.
Right.
Polls on LinkedIn are ridiculous with how much reach they get. So I
Mm.
just was studying, like, what are the content types and the formats first and foremost that people are doing. So carousels, polls, things with images on LinkedIn seem to do better than things that are just text based.
Right.
Videos on LinkedIn don't seem to do very well for me, or
Right.
most people I've seen. Like
Right.
the engagement seems to be like a fifth or a half of like what you'd get otherwise. So
Mm.
I was just taking notes and like I would just write down every single day,
Right.
hey, Ross had a video that underperformed. He got 50
Right.
likes, but
Right.
his post with an image got 100 likes. I would literally just manually keep a spreadsheet,
Right.
jotting down the same, one, two, three creators,
Yeah.
what they posted and what the result was. I was just manually tracking this. And then I was reading the comments, like what were people saying? How big were the followers that were commenting on it, right? Because like
Right.
with a lot of this stuff, like on Instagram, you used to hear this concept of like power boosting, where like the larger
Right.
someone's following, the more reach, the engagement that they had. If they engaged with your post early, it was really helpful. The
Right.
same thing's true on LinkedIn. The same thing's true on Twitter, right?
Mm.
Also, too, when you ask people to engage with you on platforms, what is the best engagement? So on Twitter, getting people to retweet you and comment seems to
Right.
have the most weight, whereas
Right.
likes are good, but they're not as great. And Twitter just recently rolled out bookmarks where you can now
Bookmarks.
see people's
Yeah.
bookmarks. I'm wondering how that's going to factor into the algorithm, and I don't know yet. So I'm studying that. That's one of the things I'm looking at.
Right.
On LinkedIn, LinkedIn has likes, comments, and reposts. Comments seem to have the greatest weight.
Mm.
Likes have some weight, and then reposts are kind of a hit or a miss, right?
Right.
The time in which people engage is really important, right? I didn't realize that like on LinkedIn, like the sooner the better, like sub an hour, you need people to engage.
Mm.
Sharing your post with a UTM to someone to engage like can actually get you in trouble. There's just like a
Right.
million things I can go on
Yeah.
about
No, that's
that
great.
like I was studying every day. There was like a dozen variables that I was studying,
Right.
and I really learned. And then
Right.
sometimes I would just DM these people or ask people like, "Yo, is there a reason why you do this?" Most of the time
Right.
they didn't respond, but
Right.
as my following's grown, as I start asking people questions, they're like, "Yo, what up, Chase? It's so cool
Right.
that you reached out." I'm like,
Right.
"I think you're the coolest, but thanks for letting me know."
Right,
Right?
right, right. I
So
love
it's
it.
kind of
That's
interesting
awesome. It's
how the
interesting. I
time
was
changed.
listening to a podcast with Mr. Beast, and he was talking about his early days of YouTube and cracking the code there. And it was very similar, where he woke up every day, studied the algorithm, studied what content was hitting. He had a spreadsheet and he went through it. I think he talked about having like a WhatsApp group with a few of his other creator friends, and they were just
Right.
geeking out about the growth in the platform. So it's interesting to hear like another creator kind of follow a very similar footstep to that. And I think it goes back to this idea of like, you just naturally have to be curious and reverse engineer the success of others to kind of get where you want to be. Is
Yeah.
reverse engineering something that you apply to all elements or just social media? Like when you're thinking about the newsletter monetization strategy, was reverse engineering success something that you apply to that as well?
Yeah, I think like to a degree, right? Like there's things that like you can't figure out from reverse engineering. You just have to figure it out by like just trying and
Right.
hacking it together and failing. But yeah, I think like my whole life has been like an experiment of reverse engineering. Like how can I get to the end result that I want as
Mm,
quickly as possible? And
right.
you're either trading time, money, or time and money, right? So I think like early in my career, I would just like kind of brute force,
Right.
try to crack the code with time, and sometimes I would and sometimes I wouldn't.
Right.
Now it's like, how do I optimize my time and spend the least amount of time possible, right? How to become the
Right.
most efficient, and therefore you're paying for it with typically money,
Right.
or there's kind of barters where, like, for example, I know people that are really big on, let's say, YouTube that aren't big on Twitter that we could just
Mm,
trade. So it
right.
kind of gets to a point too where like some of these people they don't want your money, right?
Right.
Like you paying them $1,000, like it's neither here nor there for them. But you teaching them how they can have the success that they're having on YouTube, on Twitter, or LinkedIn, that is worth, hundreds of
Right.
thousands or millions of dollars to them, right?
Right.
So can we mind share together on these topics and kind of equally add value? So yeah, my whole plan now is like, I don't care what it is. If someone knows something that I don't,
Right.
I'm gonna find a way to figure it out. I'm going to pay them. I'm going to offer them value. I'm going to
Mm,
harass them until they respond. Like,
right.
so with the newsletter, the first newsletter I built in 2017, it grew from 0 to 500,000 subscribers in 10 months
Mm,
with spending very little dollars on traditional ads. And the growth strategies were very different, but a lot of the inspiration was taken from like the hustle, the morning
right.
brew, the skim on like just creating this really strong editorial voice and
Yep.
building kind of like a community and a following. So some of those things were kind of like things I learned by studying. And
Right.
then other things I learned by like the channels that we picked
Right.
was just because we didn't have a whole lot of money that we wanted to invest at the time because we didn't have any monetization set up. So
Right.
we had to figure out ways to acquire subs for, pennies,
Right.
1 cent, 5 cent, 10 cents, and running
Mm,
ads, we were getting $1 or $2 or $3 subs, which just wasn't scalable. So
right.
yeah, I think reverse engineering like the life that you want to live by
Yeah.
following those folks that have done it
Yeah.
is super important.
I love it. If you were to try to describe yourself, would you say you're process driven or creative driven? Like, where would you say you fall in the spectrum? Are you more about the process or are you creative by nature?
Honestly, I don't know that I'm either. Like, I think I'm
Mm,
somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't
right.
think I over index in either direction. Where I think my greatest strength is that like I don't care like what happens, like as
Right.
long as I try.
Right.
Like I think the biggest strength that I have that's a lot of people's weaknesses is just like I'll put myself out there and I'm okay looking stupid. Like,
Mm,
dude, if I have an idea for a business, I don't care about the LLC, I don't care
right.
about the website. I'm just gonna start talking about it.
Right.
Um, so like for example, I don't. This is going to go live in a couple weeks, right? At this point, that this will already happen. But I'm doing a webinar on like teaching people how to become more efficient and make more money through AI for their
Cool.
sales and marketing. A
Cool.
buddy and I were literally on a call shooting the shit. We had this idea on the call. Instead of shooting the shit, we made a type form and we
Right.
posted. And
Nice.
we're like, oh, well, we got hundreds of people signed up. I guess we're doing this, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
and now in the 2 week time between when we posted and when it's actually happening, we're like, all right, well, now we actually have to go put together this presentation and like
Right.
make this happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I am. It's like if I have a good idea, I just post it. I post
Right.
a poll, I'll post something about it. And dude, this was something we came up with. Let's it's a week ago. The
Yeah.
time frame, when it happened, it wasn't relevant, but let's say it's a week ago.
Right.
Dude, I put together a type form on that call. The first part of the type form was basically screening and asking people questions. So,
Right.
what's your name? What's your business? What's your role? How much revenue does your business do per month?
Right.
What do you want to learn about AI? And what are your questions about AI, right?
Right.
Dude, I posted this actually on Twitter today. We had, I don't know, 15 to 1800 visits and we had like 800 or 900 submissions so far. So
Wild.
at this point right now, this was something we came up with. We posted it on, I think, LinkedIn a few times.
Yeah.
I sent it as a small section of my newsletter. And by the time the event happens, we'll have 1,500 or 2,000 people registered.
Right.
And almost probably if you take a third of that, we'll have like 500 to 700 people live.
That's wild.
So I think that's my greatest strength is just the
Yeah.
fact that like I'm confident enough in my abilities to make stuff happen that
Right. Right.
if I have an idea, I just do it. And
Yeah.
then oftentimes I might just have to be like, like a dog with his tail between his legs. Like, guys, I tried this. It just didn't work. Right.
Right.
It,
Right.
it doesn't. So I don't know that like I'm process or creative. I'm just like,
Mm,
just do it
yeah.
and then figure it out when you have to figure it out.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So when you launch that type of an event and it's kind of like just out of nowhere, so to speak, what are you trying to accomplish from that? Is it building the mailing lists? What's your thinking around the reason for doing it? Is it capturing attention, more followers? Why do you launch it?
Yeah, everything. So with this one in particular, it's all of the above, right? Like
Mm,
AI is just the hot thing right now. So
yep.
just can ride the wave. It's
Yep.
something that I'm deeply interested in and leveraging and using, and my friend even more so. Like,
Cool.
not that there's experts, but he, from everything I've seen, is probably one of the more knowledgeable people,
Right.
and he's using it in very specific use cases. So,
Cool.
we wanted to kind of just get attention, mailing lists, kind of start to build
Right.
noise in that realm. And then two, like we're gonna probably build out like a cohort based course or some kind of
Nice.
info product. So we now have a list of literally almost 900 people saying like what they want to learn and their questions
Right.
they have, and we're literally using AI to sort through all the typeform data. So
Cool.
we've now have like a tally of like this is what people want, and then
Right.
we have their LinkedIn, so we have their titles, and we can say, and dude, it's pretty interesting to say the data. So like let's say there's like 800 900 people.
Yep.
I don't remember the exact numbers, like mid 800s.
Right.
We have like preset revenue where like you can say, hey, my business is doing 0 to 25K a month. My
Mm,
business is doing 25 to 50K, 50 to 100,
right.
100 to 200 and then 250 plus or something.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting then to sort of that way based off like, okay, people 0 to 25K that are beginners in their business,
True.
what are the things they want to learn? And how does that differ from, people that are doing north of 250K a month?
Right.
And with that, right, like just by looking at the data, we weren't planning on doing this. We were thinking of
Right.
maybe doing like a cohort. We're
Yep.
now going to do like a low ticket course, maybe like a $200, $300 course for
Right.
the people in that smaller bucket that want more like prompts and more of those things.
Yep.
Whereas like the mid to higher ticket thing is going to be for these companies doing $250,000 a month or more
Right.
that want to build out programs and systems and ops for their company to be more efficient. And that's going to be more custom.
Yep.
So long winded. It's like, how do we capture attention?
Yep.
How do we start building out in an industry that is really exciting and really big and just growing
Right.
so fast?
Yep.
And how do we leverage 500 people or 700 people that's probably going to be live on this call
Right.
to teach them to see the chat,
Right.
to understand their questions, to answer their questions. So that way we could build products and or services that really feed their
That's cool.
needs versus trying to come up with something that we think they want and it just flopping.
Right. How is AI showing up in your workflows today when you think of all of the different platforms that you're running, the channels that you're running? I know you mentioned that you're trying to train it on your own voice before you use it on your channels. Can you talk me through a little bit of the AI infrastructure that you're using across all of your different pages and your
Yeah.
channels today?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. I think one is at the agency, we're primarily using AI around like notes and kind of transcriptions of calls.
Cool.
So there's like one called like Aroma, and there's one called like Fireflies, where they're literally in there, which removes like someone actually having to take notes. You can be like a lot more present in the meeting because you know that this notes are going to be taken and sent to everyone after. So that's been really nice. Before we'd have like account managers or assistants show up and they would be trying to like scribble notes the whole
Keep up.
time, and then you couldn't read their notes, and then they have to like stop you and be like, sorry, what was that? Or how do you spell that? What's that word?
Right.
So I think that's been like a game changer with the agency. It's just like if people can't make the calls, you're not having to go talk to someone and get the play by play, have the recording, using a lot of like the chat GPT to understand like, for example, like the data that we had, like we're feeding the data from the Typeform and it's kind of doing back to us versus otherwise we have to manually do it and try to cluster and group things together.
Yeah.
Also using things around like, on some of my pages, most of it's around like curation or repurposing versus like creation. On my personal stuff, it's all pretty much creation.
Right.
So on the pages, like I'm using, and I guess some of it's AI, some of it's just like more efficiency, but like there's like Twitter Advanced Search, there's like Taplio, there's like Tweet Hunter.
Right.
And then like there's certain tools where like you can grab URLs and it's going to spit out a carousel for you. So instead of me having to sit there and take screenshots and build it in Canva, I just plug the link into and it spits out the carousel. So I guess some of it's like quote unquote like AI, and some of it's just like tools that help with workflow.
Right.
But those types of things. So around like understanding meetings and notes, and some of these tools are even trying to now understand like the sentiment of like, was the call positive? Was it neutral? Was it negative? Who spoke the most? What were some of the key bullets or the points, right? Where was like the most engagement?
Right.
So I'm just using it to like A, cut back on meetings, and B, just like get the spark notes through some of those calls just by looking at the transcriptions.
Yeah.
And then B, like trying to organize big data in just very easy. And also too, like I'll take like old blog posts I made and be like, hey, summarize this for LinkedIn. Right. And then I can just post on LinkedIn, like, here are 3 things that, are about this from my own content. So I'm basically taking my own threads and my own things and just say, give me the spark notes, give me the digest, give me the tweet version of this.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it. When it comes to Twitter, like if you were starting all over, would you start on Twitter or would you shift your attention maybe more towards LinkedIn? Like, do you still think Twitter's the place to start or would you shift more towards LinkedIn now?
Yeah, I'm more bullish on LinkedIn.
All right.
I don't know, like starting out that it matters. I think both are hard, both are easy, right? Like they're neither here nor there.
True.
I don't know. The big reason. So I've been on LinkedIn for, I don't know, 11 or 12 years, but I half-assed it for most of it.
Right.
It wasn't until August of 2022 that I actually started going hard on it.
Right.
And essentially what it was, like the reason I started going hard was one, Elon announced that he was potentially buying Twitter.
Right.
I was like, man, this is going to be amazing or terrible for my personal brand.
Right.
And my business was pretty overly dependent looking back on Twitter as a source.
Right.
Driving tons of revenue for the agency, for the core subs, for the newsletter, right? My newsletter 75,000, I think 30 something thousand of them had come from Twitter, right? So most of them had.
Yeah.
at that point the newsletter was smaller, right? So it's probably
Mm.
a greater percentage.
Right.
I was like, this is gonna be great or terrible. Like, what
Right.
can I do?
Yeah.
I'm not good at YouTube. I'm not good at Instagram. I'm
Right.
not good at TikTok.
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn is probably where my audience is, like the B2B folks, the
Makes
folks that have
sense.
disposable income. I think the type of content I create, written text, maybe images,
Yeah.
could be good for LinkedIn. So I
Cool.
started going really, really hard on LinkedIn then. And looking back, it was the best decision because my Twitter
Love it.
has kind of been down a little bit. I'm probably down since Elon took over
Yeah.
20-25%, which I think is
Right.
common for most folks. I've
Yeah.
seen some big creators down 20, 30, 40, even sometimes 50%.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm really bullish on LinkedIn right now just because I'm having a lot of success there. And
Yeah.
Twitter, in my mind, isn't what it used to be.
Right.
Um, so it's hard. It's kind of like pick your poison. What do you
It's true.
do?
Yeah.
And I think there is a world where you could do both. I kind of was doing everything at once, and I still do everything at once. But
Right.
I know the best advice is like to focus on one. But
Right.
I don't know. I
Right.
think if you're good and if you have friends on both, just try both and see
Yeah.
which one hits.
That makes sense. When it comes to building the newsletter on LinkedIn, what strategies are you finding that work today? Are you pushing just a link, hey, everyone sign up, or are you trying something different that's going to actually engage folks in a more unique way to actually drive those conversions?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Like, one, I haven't seen people really do or talk about. I've seen some people do it, but no one's really talking about it. Is like on LinkedIn, you can edit your description after you post. So what I'll basically do is I'll post like a content piece that does well, and then as soon as it's been like an hour or it's gone viral enough,
Mm,
I'll update the description, just add like a PS to the post,
right.
like PS join 75 other thousand marketers and founders who subscribe to my newsletter here, link here. I'll drop a link in the comment. I'll create content too that like is carousel
Yeah.
that'll then offer people the option like, hey, do you want this? So for example, I did 25 chat GTP prompts to 25 extra copywriting.
Right.
Dude, this got like thousands of likes, hundreds of thousands
Right.
of views, and
Right.
everyone kept commenting saying like, hey, will you make this like a text version so we can just copy and paste it? So what I
Interesting.
quickly did is I threw it a landing page together on my site and just said, hey, do you want the text version of this post? Subscribe here. Dude, I
Yeah.
collected like 2 or 3 thousand emails.
It's wild.
So
It's
I've
wild.
just been like really smart with like creating viral content that then people want like the actual text for, because it's like when you feed a prompt, you don't want to have to
It's
copy and
true.
paste and type out
Yeah.
25 prompts, right?
Yeah.
So not that I'm being like tricky, but I'm being strategic, I guess is the
Right.
better word, of like creating content and then giving people an alternative if they want to actually like copy and paste it word for word
Right.
on how they can do it. So what they basically do is they opt into my newsletter, and the first email they receive links them to like a page or like a
Right.
Google document saying, here's the specific text that you can copy and paste.
That's cool. Are you planning for this stuff in advance, or is it like on the fly when you see this trend of people commenting, you're like, okay, I have to react? Like, how much of your work is proactive versus reactive?
Initially, and transparently, it was pretty reactive. I didn't think that
Mm,
people would want to copy it word for word or, and then paste it in.
right.
So, initially it was reactive, and now it's proactive. Now that I've had that experience, that
You
I know
know,
that people want this, I
right.
can anticipate it.
That's cool.
So I'll do it in advance and do like everything that I do, because it's for a warm audience, is so basic. Like I
Right.
don't write 1,000 word copy. I don't overly design thing. I
Yeah.
think like my greatest asset is like I'm okay with it being basic. Like it doesn't
Mm,
have to be like perfect or polished, whatever.
right.
Because people know me and like me, it's kind of part of my personal brand where it's a little bit more raw and organic
Right.
and genuine. Where I could just go build a landing page and it literally do like literally for this thing that 2 or 3 thousand people downloaded. It literally said 25 chat GT prompts. Enter your email below if you want me to email you them. Like
Right.
that's all it said. There's
Right.
no social
Right.
proof. There's no
Yeah.
all this stuff. It's just a
Mm,
simple Squarespace thing. I
right.
made it in 2 minutes. Like I
Right.
built out the automation in 2 minutes. So my whole thing is optimizing for speed
Yeah.
and asking for forgiveness if anything goes wrong.
I love it. A lot of people are going to hear that who are like more focused on design and visual. Everyone needs to
And they're
have a
gonna
perfect
cringe.
headshot. They're going to cringe. They're going to lose their mind. What do you have to say to the creator who tells themselves, I want to be in Chase's shoes, but I need to spend a lot of time fine tuning all of the things? Like, would you tell them that they need to get out of their own way? Or, yeah, I'd be curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, it would. I mean, dude, like, I think at the end of the day, like, we all think people care so much more about how we're dressed and how we
Mm,
look and how we sound and how we talk. And people probably care for like a fraction of a second, right?
right.
They probably
Nobody
look at
cares.
this and be like, classic Chase, you didn't do a whole lot, but I
Right.
really like your content. I really want it. Like,
Right.
maybe they think that, and then they just get used to it. That's just what they
Yeah.
come to expect from me. It's like, I don't do any fluff. Like, I don't do any BS. Like,
Right.
I'd rather do like a 20-minute talk that is super action packed
Yeah.
than bore someone for an hour, right?
Right.
That I think that, and that's also just my personal band and my mantra is like
right,
just be direct. Don't waste people's time. I don't want people to waste my time. So I
right.
think get out of your own way.
Yeah,
And it's gonna take time. Like it's not gonna be something that you go from 0 to 100 overnight on, like being this perfectionist.
right,
Everything's like custom, hand drawn, illustrated, beautiful, pixel
right,
perfect.
right,
But the more that you can slowly tug and pull away from that, the better.
right,
There are so many people, dude, that are way more talented than me,
right.
way smart, like way smarter, way better. But the reason that I'm doing just as well and oftentimes, if not better, is because like I just have a little bit of each of those things that makes me dangerous. And
Mm.
I'm okay with that.
Right, right. One of the things that I find fascinating about you is you're like very transparent with the creator
Yeah.
community around everything. On your
Yep.
website, it lists how much you were making when you were
Yep.
25, 23, like etc. Why are you
Yeah.
so transparent with everything?
I don't know. Like I don't really care. I feel like it's we live in the internet. Like if someone
Yeah,
really wanted to dig, maybe they could find it. I don't really
right,
know.
right.
Two, like I've always found those things super interesting and super
Mm,
inspiring for me. Like I love when people, like for example, like Pat Flynn was a big one who used to
yeah.
announce like
His
his
earning
monthly income.
reports. Yeah, I remember that.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and I just thought that was so cool and just goes against the frame of everything that people do. It's so counterintuitive. Like people don't
right.
like talking about money, and
Yeah,
a lot of my friendships started out really uncomfortable because I'd be like, "Well, so how much does that make?" And what
right,
does it do? And like
right,
people are so uncomfortable. Where it's like I often forget that because I'm so open, other people aren't. But
right.
you just attract other people that like want to share and want to give. So I think
Mm,
one is like just inspiring others because like when I saw Pat Flynn and some of these people doing it, that helped me reverse engineer like how to make money online, and it
right.
really got me started. So inspiration, kind of paying it forward type of a thing.
That's really
And
cool.
I don't know. I think being transparent is important. Like I think it allows you to be like really human and believable.
Right.
And too many people just talk a big game and they
Yeah,
don't back it up, or again, and that's to each their own. I just want to be somewhere where it's like, this is my thoughts. This is what I think. Here's how I'm doing.
right,
Listen to me, believe me, or don't. Right? Like
right,
it doesn't
right.
hurt me either way. But those that buy in, like
Yeah.
they do really, really well. And the fact that every day I get emails,
Mm,
DMs, messages, calls, texts of people just saying, I was moved by your content. I was inspired by your content.
right.
You allowed me to get out of debt, or like whatever it might be that people say,
Yeah.
like these crazy things. Sometimes they're probably just being nice. Like
Right.
that is
Yeah.
really the driving force for me to do, to the nth degree more and more.
That's cool. One of the things that I also wanted to touch on that I found fascinating is like in your story, you've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
Um, Tell the audience a little bit about your background. I'd love to kind of better understand how Crohn's disease shows up in your world and
Yeah.
how it impacted your life. And that amount of money towards a cause is admirable for sure.
Thank
I'd
you.
love to dive in a little bit around that, how it happened. And I would also, I'm a big believer in plugs. So if there's an association that you've donated in particular
Cool.
to, by all means, feel free to share that as well. But could you tell us a
Cool.
little bit around Crohn's, its impact in your life, and why you've done such a thing like raising all of this money for Crohn's disease?
Yeah, so starting with what Crohn's is. So Crohn's basically is inflammation of your digestive tract. That's like the simplest version. And then there's something called ulcerative colitis, which is inflammation of your colon. And those two are formed under what's called IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease. There's about 1.4 million people in the US that are diagnosed with this. It's obviously small as a percentage, right? It's like a percentage of a percent, but large as a number, right? It's like 1.4 million people too many. And it's
Yeah.
something that people have for their whole life. So at the age of 13, I spent the entire year pretty much being sick, like in my bed, sleeping 12, 14 hours a day. I was really skinny back then, and almost became like a skeleton. Like I was like 100 pounds at
Mhm.
the time in seventh or eighth grade, and I went down to like 85 pounds just because I couldn't, like everything that I ate, you just go to the bathroom and you
Yeah.
couldn't keep, and it hurt to eat, and it was really hard. So the problem was year after or month after month, doctor after doctor, I kept getting like misdiagnoses. Oh, you just got a bug, or you just got this, or you just got that. Where it took me close to a year to get the diagnosis that I actually had Crohn's.
Wow.
So once I started finally feeling better at 14, I was like, look, this thing sucks. This is scary. There's no getting around it. But at least if you have it, you should know. You shouldn't have to suffer for a year like I did. So that was really important and really kind of where I come from is everything is very like mission driven. Like how do
Mm,
you help other people?
right.
And I think like the awareness and getting the word out is really ingrained with me from like a teen.
Yeah.
Um, so from 14 to 16, I basically spent like all my time dedicated to raising awareness and fundraising through
Cool.
back then it was called the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America.
Right.
Today it's called Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And at 16 years old, I became the youngest board member of one of the largest chapters of the charity.
Wow.
I think there were probably 50 to 100 chapters of charity. We were like number one or two. We were
Hmm.
actually raising like a few $1 million per year
Wow.
on the charity. And I served a 6 year board term. So from 16 to 22,
Amazing.
like I, throughout high school and college, I was a board member. And I got mentored by like VPs and executives at banks and pharmaceutical
Right.
companies, which I think really play like a role in like me just having to grow up and learn and
Right.
whatnot. So that was back then and through now. And it's just important to me. So like for example, like my buddy was in I don't know if it was like the Brooklyn or like the New York Marathon a couple weeks ago, and
Yep.
I helped him raise some money through his
Cool.
thing by promoting it on social and donating to
Cool.
it. Maybe about 4 weeks ago, there was like the Turkey and Syria earthquake.
Yep.
And I had been thinking about this concept that I wanted to create for a while. Initially, it was going to be a paid product where I wanted to share 10 copywriting frameworks with people. Things like ADA, things
Right.
like, before after bridge, right? There's a bunch of these frameworks. And what I basically did is I hopped on my computer for 20 minutes using ChatGPT. Myself and ChatGPT made like this 19-page PDF that went through
Cool.
10 of these copywriting frameworks, what it is, an example, how to use it, and then the prompt to use to create it.
Right.
And instead of selling it, basically any money that was donated or purchased on that thing, I donated directly to the charity. So I just like doing things like that, like using my platform to raise awareness. So
Right.
it wasn't a lot, but literally like it took me 20 minutes to do, made
Right.
one or two posts, and
That's
then like
awesome.
a couple days later donated like $1,000 to this charity, right?
Right. That's
So
awesome.
so
That is
yeah,
sweet.
that's kind of like my story.
I love it. I appreciate you sharing that. So when it comes to that side of Chase, like I'd be very curious, like where did have you always felt the desire to give back in while also doing well? Like where does that even
Yeah.
come from? Was it Crohn's that triggered it, or like was that ingrained in you as a youngin?
Yeah, I think Crohn's was probably like a big influence. And just being on the board for 6 years, I really saw that like charities are amazing and they're great,
Right.
but most often than not, like the biggest impact for high earners and high achievers is actually making their money outside the charity
Right.
and donating sometimes time, right? Like in the sense that like a lot of the people were giving back their time to help kind of raise money and put things together. But raising money often is like mostly what these people need. So it's like, man, I could go spend a lot of time, working with a charity or working for a charity or working at a charity. But I think that would be like a really misuse where I think I could probably
Mm.
do more for the charity, like making my own business and then
Right.
donating expertise or my team's resources or those things.
Right.
So I think like early on when I had no money, it was
Right.
like trading time and just learning the ropes.
Yeah.
And now my whole vision is like, how can I learn as much as possible, make as much money as possible, and share those learnings and make donations
Right.
and share like my team's resources with them. I think that's like the perfect bridge to help them out.
Right. I love that. That's great. I'm very big into the charity world, and I love the fact that you're big on preaching it. I've spent a lot of time on boards, and I always recommend people
Love
who are
it.
like early in their careers to definitely get some board experience. So I appreciate you sharing that. What are some of the key lessons, really quickly, and then I've got two rapid fire questions to wrap
Cool.
up. What are some of the key lessons that you would have learned from that board experience that you think would benefit other folks to kind of go through? And I know it's a few years back now, but I'd love to
Yeah.
let's go back into
Yeah.
time. Is there lessons that you can look back to as saying, "Oh, I made this decision to go on the board multiple years and it had a specific benefit, and what would that benefit be?"
Yeah. So this like when I was on the board, this was like 18 to 14 years ago. That's like
Right.
the time frame.
You look
Um,
very young for your age.
yeah, I just turned 30 recently. So I think a couple things, and none of these things were things that I did intentionally. These were things that like I learned kind of in reflection. I think one is like I got access for free and
Mm,
consistently to the best mentors in the world. Like I literally had like uh so the lady that ran the board, her husband had sold a company for like over $1 billion.
right.
So she took a liking to me, he took a liking to me, and I just got to meet with them about the board, but I got to talk about things like personal and business and
Right.
aspirations.
Right.
So I was mentored from he wasn't a billionaire himself. He probably has hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So
Sure.
close enough.
Yeah.
Um, so I got mentored from him again. I didn't know at the time like what mentorship was, and
Right.
I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And he probably wasn't someone that I would have been able to access otherwise.
Right.
And then two, like we had VPs, CEOs, COOs, etc. Like some really large 8, 9-figure banks,
Right.
biotech companies that all really liked me just because
Yeah.
they saw themselves, I think, in me, and they saw that I had a lot of potential and things were just raw. So
Right.
I think long-winded, like the benefits and the impact of having mentors on your career is so super important.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people, obviously, nothing against how them, but like I think a lot of people approach it the wrong way. A
mm,
lot of times I get DMs that come across like very desperate, like I really need you to mentor me and teach me. Where it's like, I think with them, like I was giving a lot of my time and I was adding value to them, and they wanted to
right.
help kind of like steer me in the right direction. So
Right.
it was kind of like mutual vested interest. Where again, I don't think people mentor to get something in return, but I
Right.
think often than not, they want something in return, even if it's just seeing an ROI on you doing something
True.
right. You
Right.
have to be very selective. So I think
Yeah.
the power of a mentor and the power of mentors in that case,
Yeah.
and then I think having like channels and outlets in which you can learn things outside of your normal context. So for me, that taught me like guerrilla marketing and marketing
Right.
in a sense that like if you could get people to donate money or
Right.
donate time, those are very valuable things that then translated to like how do I convince people to save time or
Yeah.
make money or learn from me now. So I just think like psychologically and like fundamentally, like how I think about storytelling and copywriting and marketing comes from that lens of like, it's just like, when people, try to sell you like a religion, it's like if they could
Right.
sell you a religion, they could sell you,
Right.
solar for your house, right?
Yep.
So I
For
just think
sure.
certain
Yeah.
life experiences
Mm,
really mesh well that you don't see and that you can't connect the dots, right? Like the whole, I don't know if it's Steve Jobs said, like you can't connect the dots
right.
looking forwards, like you only connect them looking backwards. It's like
Yeah.
those are kind of like the takeaways I had is like the value and kind of the importance of mentorship,
Yeah.
and then looking outside of your industry and doing things outside of your industry to try to get a unique perspective that you can
Mm,
bring in.
I love it. That's awesome. All right. Before you became a marketer, what is something that you wish that you would have known?
Before I became a marketer, I think people are focused too much on like pushing products and pushing services and ignoring the human on the other side. I think like humanizing a brand is probably the most important, the least, understood, the least utilized thing possible. So
Yeah.
ways in which we do this. So for like our clients that sell, let's say like e-commerce products, we have like this series that we'll run called like literally introduction to the team. So one of our clients is 8 Sleep, like the mattress company.
Yeah.
I call them like the
Yeah.
Tesla for mattresses.
Right.
What we basically did is like we did a 9-part email sequence where we didn't want to just focus on the founders and whatnot. They're obviously very important, but they're not the only people. So we did, every week, every couple of weeks for 3 months, meet Ross, who's the engineer, meet Chase, who's the customer support, meet Cinnamon, who was the CEO, like
Right.
whoever it was.
Right.
And we would just show their picture and we would talk about them. We talk about their role and why they like the product and what their day to day looks like,
Right.
really allowing them to be like, sure, this is a $3,000 mattress and we
Mm,
want you to buy it, but we're people and this is what we do and this is how we do it. So I
right.
think like humanizing the brand and, as a personal brand, it's a little bit easier because you are one and the same. You're the company
Right.
and the person,
Yeah.
but brands themselves, I think, get that wrong.
I love it. And in order to be a great founder, entrepreneur, what is the most important skill that you've decided to kind of develop and constantly work on?
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of like what I alluded for before is like as a rookie first time again, I've been a founder a bunch before, but like the first time running a company of this size, like almost 140
Yeah.
employees, I was like, man, we're so cool. We got so many employees. This is so great. What a flex. And you just create like these people that just look up to you and bow down to you. And therefore, like if you don't respond, they can't make decisions. Like they're almost
Mm,
paralyzed because you haven't enabled them to make decisions on their own.
right.
So I think like the biggest mindset change over the years, like I don't even want to be involved. Like
Right.
if you need me, call me. I'm here. But like just do it. Like you're
Right.
smarter than me. You're better than me. We're recruiting people that are more talented. Like you tell me what do you want me to do for you? How can I help you? Right.
Right.
So I think
Right.
like getting out of their way, empowering your team, letting them lead, those types of things are super important. Like now it's like, dude, like no one really reports to me. Like I don't manage anyone. Like I've gone
Right.
out of the way and
Love
I've
it.
really helped like the people that were supposed to be under me be
Right.
very autonomous. Where like, I can't remember the last time someone's asked me for something, right?
Love
And
it.
if they have, they're like, "Can you stop being cringy on social media?" It's probably all they've asked me, right? I'm obviously joking, but like
I know.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
I'd say that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Chase, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It's been a great to chat with you. It's been amazing to hear more about your story. Folks, if you do want to connect with Chase, you can find him at chasedimond.com, Dimond. Want to make sure that you get it spelled correctly. Follow him on Twitter as well, ecom Chase Diamond, and LinkedIn. That's the channel where he's putting out tons of great content. And also, I strongly encourage folks to check out Daily Copywriter as well. Chase, is there anything that I missed that folks should also check out to stay connected with you?
No, this was great. Thanks for having me. And if you guys made it this far, thanks for listening. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Chase. Thanks so much.